Hey guys, what's up? This is Panzer Dragon, and today we're doing 18 tips on improving as a jungler in Season 5.
Now before we begin, if you guys haven't already checked out my other video, 15 tips on improving as a jungler, I actually recommend you looking at that video before watching this video, because honestly, that video has a lot of great tips for you guys in general, while this video has tips based off the new jungle, along with some tips that I didn't really mention in the other video, which most tips still do apply to Season 5. So if you guys haven't seen 15 tips on improving as a jungler, either click the annotation right here in the middle, or check out the description below for a link to the video. Anyways, with all that being said, let's get started.
Alright, so for the first tip, I'm going to say that the best route is going to be clearing one side of your jungle, and then recalling and getting your Stalker's Blade or Trailblazer, and then going to your other side of your jungle and clearing your buff, and then doing whatever you want it. The reason I believe this route is really good for most junglers is because first of all, you get your second tier jungle item, and second of all, you have 4 or 3 health pots to sustain yourself, so you don't have to recall when you're low and you can keep ganking or farming or whatever you'd like to do. The only con is that if people start figuring out that this is a thing and a lot of junglers are starting to do this, they might see a pattern and then they'll take your other buff. And also, I mean, if you aren't a high sustain jungler like Lee Sin or Elise, and you go to say golems to red to blue, you'll probably have to recall after the blue, and you're kind of wasting the time that you have the buff by recalling and going back to base. So you might as well have it when you're trying to do things in clear camps or trying to gank. The next tip is smiting the enemy wolves. So basically, anytime you are in the enemy's jungle and you're by their wolves, always try to prioritize it and smite it. The reason behind this is because it basically provides you a ward in one side of the enemy's jungle, which can provide you a lot of information for the next 90 seconds. You can think of it like this: it's worth 75 gold since it does last for 90 seconds and the ward only lasts for 180 seconds. But let's say you can split down a ward into 2 and it only lasts for 90 seconds, well, the amount of vision that you get with the Spirit Wolf will definitely be around 75 gold, if not a bit more. Though of course I wouldn't prioritize going into their enemy's jungle as it can be dangerous, but if you are ever around their wolves, definitely go for it. Alright, so for the next tip, try to clear both sides of your jungle. The reason behind this is because the only way that jungle creeps can level up is by killing them. And so say if you're sticking your top side of the jungle and like you're camping top and mid lane, and then after about like 3 or 4 minutes you decide to go into your bot side of the jungle, and then you clear it and all of a sudden it doesn't give as much experience points or gold since you haven't killed it in a while. So what I like to do is balance my route where I go on my bot side of the jungle to my top side and just like keep farming both sides of the jungle to make sure the jungle creeps don't get under leveled at one point in the game. Although this doesn't mean that if your strategy is to camp a lane and get them fed, then by all means go for it. Just don't let one side of your jungle to be under leveled for about 5 minutes, or else it can bite your ass later in the game. You will also most likely automatically do this because one side of your jungle has already been cleared by you probably already, and so since respawn timers on camps are longer, you'll probably just default to clearing camps on your other side of the jungle, so you don't have to worry about this tip that much. So for our next tip, the Scuttle Crab is really good for contesting Dragon or Baron. So if you feel like the enemy team wants to contest the Dragon or Baron, I advise you to do that Scuttle Crab right away so that if they do try and contest, you have the movement speed to kite and chase the enemy down. And also if your AD carry is fed, then it's also really hard for the enemy to chase them down and try and kill them. And also if you aren't going to do Dragon and instead are going to team fight, then you have an easier initiation onto the enemy team with the movement speed. Overall, you do have an advantage over the enemy with the extra mobility. Alright, so for the next step, you want to get your super on your first or second back. The reason behind this is because vision control is really strong in any types of ELO. And mainly, of course, when you're about to gank, you can sweep a bush to see if there's a ward in it. And also, since you can buy wards, there's actually no real reason for you to keep your warding trinket. And there's no other way to reveal wards except with a vision ward, but of course you want to use it for places where it'll provide vision and not die for a long time. Also, when planning to swap your warding trinket to a sweeper, make sure to put your warding trinket anywhere around you as you are getting rid of it, so you might as well use the ward when you still have it. Alright, so next up we're going to be explaining 4 ways on how to prioritize the Scuttle Crab. The first tip is don't prioritize Scuttle Crab that much around levels 3 to 4. The reason behind this is because it gives such a small amount of experience points, and if you do take it in the early game, you're going to be a bit behind on the enemy jungler in levels. Now if you have damage and not a lot of resources to waste, or you have hard CC, or basically taking it out quickly without using a lot of mana,
then of course go for it. But if there's a gank sitting around, then prioritize the gank over the Scuttle Crab. Now say if you're just walking through the river or you have nothing else to do, then you can prioritize it, and as you can see in this clip, there's basically nothing for me to do as all lanes are pushed and my top side of the jungle is cleared. Of course I could go into the enemy's jungle and do his camps, but my playstyle doesn't really like getting aggressive into the enemy's jungle. Now once you're over level 5, assume it's like a mini camp. Now what I mean by this is you can prioritize it somewhat now, because it does give a pretty good amount of gold and vision, and also even though it doesn't give a good amount of XP, being one level behind the enemy jungler is okay at this point since you already have your ultimate. Alright, so the next step is going to be like a training tip. Basically what I want you to do is every time you recall, buy a ward or even buy a pink ward. By doing this, you'll just instinctively buy wards and try and help your team for map control and vision. Like even then, I still forget to buy wards from time to time, but I do know that if I bought those wards, they would benefit my team and me greatly, since we know where the enemy is and we can react to their movements. Alright, so for the next tip, buy as much health pots as you can. The reason behind this is because you want to sustain yourself for doing more ganks or even more clears. What I actually used to do on my first back was buy a pink ward and have like one pot or something like that. But what I ended up noticing was after like one gank and maybe 2 clears, I had to go back to get more pots. But this way, if you have 4 pots, you could probably do like 2 or 3 ganks or 4 or 3 clears. Trust me, when I first bought 4 pots after my first back, it was way more efficient than buying a ward and 1 pot, especially in the early levels where the jungle can sort of hurt you. Alright, so for the next tip, choosing your jungle item. Basically what I would do is Stalkers for high sustain and Trailblazer for the low sustain or farmers. So this one's pretty basic. If you have Stalkers, it helps you ganking, and if you have Trailblazer, it helps you clear your jungle a bit more efficiently. So yeah, pretty basic stuff. But now with the addition of swapping out your jungle item before it is enchanted, some junglers who have a hard time clearing at first but get a bit better later in the game or actually benefit from Stalker's Blade by stealing movement speed from the enemy like Hecarim, Olaf, or even Wukong, it's definitely worth noting that you should probably switch from the Trailblazer to the Stalker's Blade. And even on champions who farm more a bit in the early game but once they get the ultimate, Stalker's Blade is relatively the better way to go instead of finishing off with the Trailblazer. For the next tip is basically always have one smite charge with Stalker's Blade. The reason behind this is because you might need it for ganking somebody or even getting away or chasing someone down. Of course, this does not mean you should hold on to it all the time. Maybe you need to do a camp and you just need the smite to finish it off before dying or something like that. But generally just try and hold on one smite charge at all times. With Trailblazer, of course, it's basically a farming tool, so smite whatever. It's actually up pretty often in 5.1 I find. So if you need to smite your wolves in the early game, which in most situations it's not that great, again, have to emphasize it's used for farming, so use it for farming. The best thing in general to smite is the raptors, as taking out wards for like a smite is really efficient, and it also tells you that the enemy knows where you are, so it's pretty good value information when you detect a ward. Also, if you do have Trailblazer and you do smite the raptors, it's pretty good too, since you do stun them and that reduces the damage that they deal to you. So yeah, in my opinion, it's pretty efficient. Alright, so for the final tip, I'm going to be explaining why the deep pink ward is so good into the enemy jungle. The reason that putting this pink ward right here is really good is because in most situations, the enemy's jungle route does not ever go through that bush. Like say if the enemy goes from Golems to Wraiths, he'll probably not check that bush due to pathing, and like the only way this pink ward is revealed is if the enemy is coming from his base and going straight to his red. And since the red buff actually comes up every 5 minutes, you will be getting a lot of value out of this pink ward since you have a general idea of where the enemy jungler is. Alright, so that is the end of this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it, feel free to subscribe and leave a comment below on what you guys did like about this video. And if you guys do like tier lists, aka what champions are best right now in the current meta, then also check out the video right here. Anyways, I am Panzer Dragon, and I'll see you guys next time.